So I am 1 month into the Nutrisense continuous glucose monitoring program, and I have received my next batch of monitors, and I have a great amount of data that I'm really excited to share with you. So as I get started in applying my latest monitor, let me just tell you, this has been such an eye-opening experience when it comes to the food that I eat and the impact that it has on my body. I really had no idea to the degree of what I was putting in and how my body was reacting to it. I'm just amazed at the way things have turned out and the information I've gotten. So let me share a little bit with you. So what you see here on the screen is the day of my Spartan Ultra. This was October 21st. It was 33 miles in length. The first blue dot is when I woke up in the morning and I had breakfast at the house. I did some yoga exercises prior to the race starting just to kind of get warmed up. And prepping my body, I had some UCAN before I got started with the race. This was my UCAN powder that I normally take prior to a race. And then over the course of the race, I would take a UCAN bar periodically to keep my energy up. One of the fascinating pieces of information is as we get over here into the afternoon, you can see that my blood glucose drops down at the very lowest point here to 27. Now, the nutritionist that I spoke with has told me that she believes this to be a false reading, that perhaps I had damaged the CGM. And if you know what Spartan races are like, you understand the physicality that goes with it. And when I do barbed wire crawls, I tend to roll. So it's possible that I did, at the time, damage the sensor or alter the sensor in some way. But you can see that it does pick back up as we go into the rest of the afternoon. And then it quits because at this point, the sensor had actually come loose from my body. So I didn't get any further readings from that point on. One of the concerns that I have with the nutritionist telling me that this is a false reading is because a low glucose level like this should be fairly dangerous to the body. But during a race, when my body is consuming every bit of fuel that it has available to it, I'm not so sure that this is a false positive. So I have some more testing that I need to do, some different things that I want to try for some other races when it comes to how I'm doing fueling to see if this is a true reading or a false reading. If it's a true reading, it would explain some of the bonking feeling that happens towards the end of a race. And it would definitely imply that I need to modify my fueling as we get later into a race. Because, here we are, this is 8.5 hours into the race at this point. Here we have the data from my 100K race on October 28th up at Lake Murray, Oklahoma. You can see with the first blue dot, that was when I woke up, and then I had my usual breakfast at home, and then I followed it a short time later as we started the race with UCAN bars. And I was much more consistent in this race about when I was eating and how frequently I was eating. You can see that my glucose never really drops to the levels that I saw in the previous Spartan race. So this was one of the tests that I did. I have another race coming up where I'm going to do some additional testing just to see what else might change. This is a much more solid representation of what I would expect my body to be doing if I'm continuing to feed it during the course of a race. There's no real bonking anywhere in here. There's no massive energy drops. And as we get to, late in the day, when my race is over, because the conditions just didn't allow me to finish the 100K, so I quit at the 50K. And I had a hamburger for dinner, and you can see the large spike that comes from the hamburger as we jump up here to 121. And then I did end up eating again later because I was still quite hungry. So at 9 p.m., I stopped off at Whataburger on the way home and got another burger to eat. So you can see the large spike that comes from that, and even the spike that comes in after I've gone to bed. I love the data that's represented here on the screen. On the previous one, you could see the dinner that I had, and on this one, you can see the effect of the Whataburger and the onion rings that I had eaten a couple hours before. And so I get this massive spike around just before 1 a.m. up to 147. Spikes like this are what my nutritionist tells me we really want to avoid. These kinds of spikes are supposed to be really hard on the body. I find this data to be very fascinating. On November 2nd, we had a workout with a number of people at Spartan. So I got up that morning and I had my usual breakfast, and you see the little spike that comes from that following along. And then at lunch, we actually had a vegetarian style breakfast. So there was carrots, there was nuts, there was a lot of different vegetables, some small muffins. And you can see that there's hardly any spike that comes after that. We did go for a walk immediately after eating, which I believe helped smooth out any spike that may have been there, and actually led to a little bit of a drop over here down to the 89. Shortly after that, we had an early dinner or a late afternoon lunch that was pizza. And you can see the direct correlation from eating that pizza, and we jump right up and we have a nice little spike on glucose from all the carbs that come from pizza. We then continued to have some presentations, but there were no working out after that. So you see a little bit of up and down before we head way down here to a wonderful barbecue dinner, which was then followed up with some spikes as well. And the last piece of data that I want to show you here, this was absolutely fascinating to me in that I stopped off and I picked up some sushi to take home for lunch, and the resulting spike absolutely blew my mind. When I did a little bit of research on this, I discovered that it is very typical for places to include sugar in the rice when they make sushi rolls. And so this particular case, the rice that was part of this caused a massive spike. I went almost a 70-point jump from 110 up to 180. There was so little use of this amount of glucose in my body. This is just a terrible spike, and I can only imagine the internal struggles that this put on my body based on what I'm hearing from my nutritionist. Okay, so I do have one more piece of data that I want to add to this. On the next day, I had what I thought was going to be a really good lunch. I had some mixed vegetables, some pulled pork in a bowl by itself. But at the end of that, I wanted a little bit of crunch to go with it. So I had a small bag of pretzels, and you can see just looking at this, the massive spike. I went up to 162 from my usual, low 90s range. A 60-point jump over lunch. Again, the numbers coming from my nutritionist is this is much too high for what I should be having at lunch. So something to be working on there. Either more protein to go with it, or perhaps just cutting out the pretzels. Thanks for watching, and follow for more, because who knows what we're going to find out next.